They laughed in my face, my own family, calling me a fool for clinging to a patch of dirt they swore was worthless, a barren shame on the Henderson name. Harold, my father, and Phyllis, my sister, practically spat the words disgrace as they cut me off completely. They saw only decay and weeds, but beneath those very weeds, I was unearthing glittering proof that their scorn had led me straight to a fortune beyond their wildest dreams. Before I continue, drop a comment telling me where you're listening to this from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. You won't want to miss the ending. My family, the Hendersons, had always prided themselves on appearances. We lived in a beautiful, sprawling colonial home, nestled on the most manicured plot of land in the entire county. My father, Harold Henderson, was a man who measured success in acres and social standing, his every decision calibrated to enhance the family's reputation. My older sister, Phyllis, was his perfect reflection, a social butterfly whose life revolved around charity galas and climbing the ladder of local women's clubs. They were the epitome of what our community admired. Prosperous, polished, and utterly conventional. And then there was me, Dorothy. I was the quiet one. The one who preferred dusty old books to garden parties, who found more joy tracing the lines on an ancient map than discussing the latest gossip. My heart had always belonged to a different kind of wealth, one that couldn't be counted in banknotes or social invitations. It belonged to the neglected Henderson farm, a place my family had inherited generations ago, but had allowed to fall into disrepair. They saw it as an eyesore, a testament to forgotten hardship, a blight on their otherwise pristine image. But I saw something else. I saw history, I saw stories, I saw life. From the moment I was a little girl, that farm called to me, while Phyllis was practicing her curtsies and memorizing the names of eligible bachelors. I was sneaking away, mud on my boots, to explore the crumbling barn, the overgrown orchards, the stream that whispered secrets as it flowed over ancient stones. My great-great-grandmother's journals, hidden away in a forgotten trunk in the attic, were my most prized possessions. They weren't about social events or recipes. They were filled with observations about the land, strange plant life, peculiar mineral deposits, and tantalizing hints of stones that glowed like the sun. My family dismissed these as the ramblings of a whimsical ancestor. I saw them as clues. Harold, my father, would always shake his head, a look of weary disapproval etched on his face whenever the farm was mentioned. "Dorothy, it's an embarrassment," he'd say, his voice firm but laced with a parental exasperation he barely tried to hide. "It's draining our resources. It's time to sell that worthless patch of dirt and invest in something productive, something that reflects well on the family name." Phyllis, ever the loyal daughter, would chime in with her own practiced disdain. "Honestly, Dorothy, what good is dirt? It's just dirt. You could be so much more if you'd just let go of this foolish sentimentality." They tried to push me towards other paths. They wanted me to marry a respectable, well-to-do man, someone who would blend seamlessly into their world of status and convention. They urged me to pursue sensible hobbies, like gardening or learning to arrange flowers for the church. But my mind was always on the land, on the secrets I felt humming beneath my feet. I spent countless hours poring over old geological surveys of the region, comparing them to the vague, poetic descriptions in my great-great-grandmother's journal. I walked the farm's forgotten trails, not just observing the wildflowers, but looking at the subtle shifts in the earth, the way the light hit certain rock formations, the unusual patterns of moss growing on a weathered outcrop near a dried-up spring. My expertise wasn't from a university. It was from a lifetime of quiet observation and an unwavering conviction that this land held more than just soil. The breaking point came, as these things often do, with a seemingly simple request. Harold decided he wanted to liquidate the farm. He had a grand plan to buy a large tract of fertile land on the other side of the county, a move he believed would solidify our family's agricultural empire and silence any whispers about our disgraceful old property. He called a family meeting, a formal affair where he laid out his intentions with the certainty of a man who expected no argument. I sat there, listening to his confident pronouncements, my heart sinking with each word. "It's for the best, Dorothy," he said, turning to me with a paternal smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We'll get a fair price for it, even in its current state. You'll have your share, of course, to invest wisely, perhaps in a nice little cottage closer to town where you can pursue your interests." He made interests sound like a polite euphemism for unproductive obsessions. Phyllis nodded vigorously. "Think of the relief, Dorothy. No more talk of that old ruin. We can finally hold our garden parties without fear of scandalizing anyone with your muddy boots." Her laugh was light, dismissive. That's when I spoke, my voice a little shaky at first, but gaining strength with every word. "Father, I can't let you sell it. This farm, it's not just land, it's our legacy, it's history. I believe there's something extraordinary hidden here." Harold's smile vanished. Phyllis's eyes widened, a flicker of irritation crossing her perfectly made-up face. "Extraordinary?" Harold scoffed. "It's extraordinary only in its capacity to lose money and attract vermin. What exactly are you talking about, Dorothy?" I tried to explain, stumbling over my words as I tried to convey the deep, intuitive certainty I felt. I spoke of the ancient indigenous legends I'd read about, stories of a golden heart of the earth, protected by sacred markers. I mentioned the peculiar mineral deposits, the patterns of moss, the faint clues in my great-great-grandmother's journals that hinted at something profound beneath the surface. I knew it sounded like a fairy tale to them, a madman's dream, as they would later call it, but I had to try. Harold listened, his face growing redder with each sentence. "Nonsense," he finally roared, slamming his fist on the polished mahogany table. "Legends? Moss? Are you quite mad, Dorothy? This is a business decision, not some fanciful treasure hunt. You are squandering your inheritance on a delusion," Phyllis chimed in, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Oh, Dorothy, please, just let it go. You're embarrassing yourself. And us." The argument escalated. Voices rose, accusations flew. They accused me of being stubborn, ungrateful, irresponsible, a disgrace to the Henderson name. I accused them of being blind, of valuing appearances over history, of chasing fleeting wealth while ignoring a profound legacy. In the end, Harold stood up, his face grim, his eyes cold. "If you insist on clinging to that worthless property, Dorothy," he declared, his voice cutting through the tense silence, "then you will do so alone. You are no longer a part of this family, not until you come to your senses. You will receive no further financial support, no social standing from us. Consider yourself disowned." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Phyllis looked away, a small, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. They cut me off financially, socially ostracized me, and publicly proclaimed that I had squandered my inheritance on a madman's dream. Their friends, their associates, everyone in their social circle was subtly, or not so subtly, encouraged to distance themselves from poor, deluded Dorothy. My name became synonymous with foolishness, a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. I left that house that day, my heart aching with a pain I hadn't known possible. But beneath the sorrow, a tiny spark of defiance ignited. They had seen only dirt and decay, but they had unknowingly delivered into my hands the greatest treasure imaginable. They wanted to forget me, to erase me from their perfect picture. But I knew, deep down, that soon, very soon, they would be forced to remember the forgotten farm and the fortune they so carelessly cast aside. I was alone, yes, but I was free, and I had a mission. My first few months on the farm were difficult, to say the least. The farmhouse was indeed dilapidated, with leaky roofs, sagging floors, and a pervasive smell of damp earth and forgotten things. The fields were choked with weeds, the fences broken, the old well barely producing a trickle of murky water. It was a monumental task, but I embraced it with a fierce determination. I repaired what I could, cleaned relentlessly, and slowly, painstakingly, brought a semblance of order to the chaos. Every nail I hammered, every weed I pulled, felt like a small act of rebellion, a testament to my belief. I lived simply, selling off a few old pieces of furniture I'd inherited and whatever scraps of metal I could find on the property. My meals were frugal, often consisting of vegetables I managed to coax from a small garden patch and wild berries I foraged from the overgrown woods. The solitude was immense, but it also brought a clarity I'd never experienced in the bustling, superficial world of my family. I had nothing to prove to them anymore. My only duty was to the land, to the history I felt compelled to uncover. The physical labor was exhausting, but my mind was always at work. I spent my evenings poring over those journals, cross-referencing my great-great-grandmother's cryptic notes with the geological maps. She wrote of stones like suns, and I remembered the reddish-orange quartz I had noticed in the dried-up spring bed, sparkling faintly when the afternoon sun hit it just right. She mentioned markers, and I recalled the unusual, almost unnaturally smooth stones arranged in a circle near an ancient oak, half buried in moss. One crisp autumn morning, I was clearing brush near the old stream, following a faint, overgrown path that seemed to lead nowhere. My great-great-grandmother had written about a secret path to the heart of the earth, and this felt like it. The path disappeared into a tangle of thorny vines and thick undergrowth. With my trusty machete, I began to hack away, sweat stinging my eyes, my muscles burning. It was slow, arduous work, but something kept me going. A whisper from the past, a tug in my spirit. After hours of relentless clearing, the undergrowth finally thinned, revealing not just more trees, but something else entirely. It was a shallow indentation in the earth, barely noticeable, almost completely swallowed by nature. As I knelt closer, pushing away leaves and damp soil, I saw it. A rough, almost perfectly circular opening, partially collapsed, leading into darkness. It wasn't a natural cave. The edges were too regular, too worked. My heart began to pound with a thrilling, terrifying excitement. This wasn't just dirt. This was the entrance. This was the threshold to something truly ancient, something that my family had dismissed as a fool's errand. And I was about to step inside. My heart thumped a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I peered into the darkness. A chill, earthy smell wafted out, carrying with it the scent of damp soil and something else, something ancient and untouched. This wasn't just a hole in the ground. It was an invitation to a secret world. I took a deep breath, grabbed the flashlight from my backpack, and pushed aside the last clinging vines. The opening was small, requiring me to stoop low, almost crawling as I eased myself inside. The beam of my flashlight danced nervously, illuminating rough-hewn rock walls that seemed to lean in, pressing down on me. Dust motes, disturbed by my entry, swirled in the light, like tiny, ethereal dancers. It was a small passage at first, narrow and winding, leading deeper into the earth. I moved slowly, cautiously, my boots crunching on loose pebbles and dry leaves that had obviously fallen in through cracks over the years. The air grew cooler, carrying a profound stillness that swallowed every sound, even the echo of my own breath. I thought about my family, about Harold and Phyllis, and their dismissive laughter. They would never venture into a place like this, so far removed from their manicured lawns and polished furniture. They would scoff at the dirt, the dust, the utter lack of modern convenience. But for me, this place held more promise than any gilded ballroom. This was real. As I moved deeper, the passage gradually widened, leading into what felt like a small chamber. The ceiling rose higher, and the walls, though still rough, showed signs of intentional shaping. This wasn't a natural cave. My beam caught something on the wall, something different from the jagged rock. It was a series of faint lines, barely visible beneath a film of mineral deposits. I ran my fingers over them, a thrill running down my spine. These were carvings, primitive and stylized, but undeniably human. They depicted stick figures, animals, and what looked like a radiant sun, just as my great-great-grandmother's journal had described. Markers, old as time, showing the path to the sun's heart. My excitement surged, banishing any lingering fear. I was on the right track. My great-great-grandmother's words, dismissed as fanciful ramblings, were proving to be literal truths. I knelt, examining the ground, and spotted something else. Not just pebbles, but fragments of what looked like very old, rough tools, chipped and worn, made of stone and hardened wood. This wasn't just a chamber. It was an ancient workspace, abandoned centuries ago. I spent the next few days returning to the site, carefully excavating the collapsed section, shoring up unstable areas with timbers I salvaged from the old barn. The work was slow and exhausting, physically demanding in a way I hadn't anticipated. But with every bucket of dirt I removed, with every precarious rock I stabilized, I felt closer to the truth. I was an archaeologist, a geologist, and a detective all rolled into one, piecing together a story whispered by the very earth itself. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I cleared enough debris to reveal the true extent of the first chamber. My flashlight beam swept across the far wall, and that's when I saw it. It wasn't immediately obvious, hidden beneath a thin layer of grime and mineral crust. But as I carefully brushed it away with my gloved hand, a glimmer appeared. Then another, and another. It was a seam of raw gold running through a vein of deep red and orange quartz. It wasn't a faint shimmer, it was unmistakable. The quartz itself seemed to catch and reflect the light, radiating a warm, fiery glow, just like captured sunbeams. Stones that glowed like the sun, my great-great-grandmother had written. And there they were, before my very eyes. My breath hitched, my hands trembled, not from cold, but from sheer, overwhelming awe. This wasn't just a vein, it was a treasure, not only of precious metal but of forgotten history. This was the Sunstone Vein, the legendary mine, worked by an ancient civilization centuries ago, lost to time and dismissed as myth. My family had called this dirt worthless. They had disowned me, shamed me, mocked my madman's dream. But here, in the silent, echoing heart of the earth, I had found their folly and my fortune. The forgotten farm was anything but worthless. It was a gold mine, literally, and I was its sole possessor. The discovery of the Sunstone Vein was breathtaking, but it also presented a whole new set of challenges. I couldn't just haul raw, unrefined gold out of the earth and sell it. It needed to be processed, separated from the quartz and other minerals, and I certainly couldn't involve anyone else. The secret of this mine was mine alone, a truth I guarded fiercely, especially from my family. My mind, always drawn to solutions, began to whir. My great-great-grandmother's journals had hints of rudimentary processing methods, and my own years of self-taught geology had given me some theoretical understanding. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I had to try. My first task was to create a street lab, my own makeshift refining station, a place where I could bring the Earth's raw gifts to their purest form. I chose an old, forgotten tool shed on the far side of the property. It was barely more than a lean-to, but it was out of sight and offered just enough shelter. The roof had gaping holes, letting in shafts of sunlight that illuminated the thick dust motes dancing in the air. The floor was packed earth, uneven and littered with forgotten nails and bits of rusted metal. This was far from the sterile, gleaming laboratories I'd seen in books, but it was my sanctuary, my forge of destiny. My purpose was crystal clear: to turn their scorn into my triumph. Every piece of salvaged material I brought into that shed was a step towards proving Harold and Phyllis wrong, a defiant act against their dismissal of my worthless farm. I gathered what I could find around the property: old buckets, some discarded plumbing pipes that had once carried water to the forgotten chicken coop, rusted metal sheets from the collapsed barn roof, and several broken glass jars that had once held preserves. I found a few sturdy, worn-out wooden planks to create a rough workbench, and a pile of discarded bricks from a crumbling chimney, which I knew would be useful for a crude furnace. Even some cracked clay pots and old tin cans became part of my collection, repurposed with a fierce ingenuity. I began by experimenting with rudimentary crushing methods to free the gold from the quartz. A heavy sledgehammer and a sturdy flat stone served as my first tools. Then came the challenge of separation. I remembered reading about simple gravity separation and decided to build a small sluice. Using the salvaged plumbing pipes and carefully angled metal sheets, I constructed a simple channel. I would crush the ore, then wash it through my makeshift sluice, hoping the heavier gold particles would settle, while the lighter rock fragments washed away. It was a messy, laborious process, often yielding little more than muddy water and disappointment. My hands were perpetually stained, my clothes caked with dirt and grit. Day after day, I toiled. There were moments of despair, moments when the sheer scale of the task seemed insurmountable, when the gold felt like a mocking illusion. But then I would think of my father's dismissive voice, my sister's condescending smile, and a fresh wave of determination would wash over me. I wasn't just looking for gold. I was seeking validation, not for them, but for myself, for the quiet girl who had always believed in the unseen. I refined my methods, adjusting the angle of my sluice, experimenting with different grinding techniques. I learned to recognize the subtle glint of gold amidst the slurry. I even managed to rig up a crude charcoal-fired furnace from my discarded bricks and clay pots, hoping to smelt the fine gold dust into something more substantial. It was dangerous work, full of smoke and intense heat, but I proceeded with meticulous care. Finally, after weeks of relentless effort, late nights illuminated by a sputtering kerosene lamp, and countless frustrating failures, the moment arrived. I had processed a small batch of concentrate from the sluice through my crude furnace. With trembling hands, I carefully removed the crucible. It was still hot, shimmering with residual heat. As it cooled, I watched, holding my breath, pushing away the lingering doubts that always tried to creep in. And then I saw it. At the bottom of the crucible, nestled amidst the cooled slag, was a tiny, irregular nugget. It gleamed with a soft, undeniable luster, a brilliant, buttery yellow against the dark, rough residue. It was pure gold. My gold. I picked it up, feeling its unexpected weight, its cool, smooth surface. It was small, no bigger than my thumbnail, but it represented everything. It was the physical manifestation of my conviction, the proof that my madman's dream was real. The shed, once a symbol of decay, now felt like a vault of unimaginable potential. The first successful test was done. I had found the mine. I had extracted the gold. Now, the real work began. Figuring out how to turn this small personal victory into something that would reshape my life, and perhaps teach a certain family a very humble lesson, and they wouldn't even know it was coming. The tiny nugget of gold felt heavy in my palm, a warm promise against the chill of the shedding autumn air. It was a tangible victory, but also a stark reminder of the immense work ahead. This was just the beginning. I needed to scale up, not massively, but enough to transform my life without drawing suspicion. That meant more trips to the mine, more crushing, more refining in my makeshift lab. My daily routine became a steady rhythm of digging in the hidden chamber, carefully extracting the glittering quartz, and then bringing it back to the shed. I was a ghost on my own land, moving with purpose, always watchful. The shed, which I now affectionately called my Sunstone Sanctuary, became a whirlwind of activity. I collected more old buckets, discarded tools, anything I could repurpose. I even found an old rusty wheelbarrow someone had left by the roadside, which became invaluable for transporting the crushed ore. This increased activity, however, began to draw unwanted attention. My family had effectively cut me off from polite society, but my farm was still visible from the main road, a dusty ribbon that connected our small town to the wider world. Cars, once rare, seemed to pass with increasing frequency, their occupants slowing down, their eyes drawn to the strange sight of the disgraced Henderson girl sifting through piles of dirt and what looked like junk. One sunny afternoon, as I was pushing the squeaky wheelbarrow laden with crushed quartz from the mine entrance back towards the shed, I heard the distinctive sound of a car slowing down considerably. I didn't look up, used to the occasional gawking. But then I heard voices, loud and clear, carrying on the crisp air. "Look at her!" a woman's voice shrieked, laced with a mixture of pity and outright amusement. "Is that Dorothy Henderson, Harold's daughter? My goodness, what has she become?" Another voice, deeper and equally dismissive, joined in. "They say she lost her mind, wandering around that old place collecting garbage. What a mess!" A snicker followed, then an exaggerated, theatrical gasp. "She's actually pushing a wheelbarrow of dirt! She's turned into a complete junk collector. Can you believe it?" I felt their eyes on me, sharp and critical, like tiny pinpricks on my skin. I kept my gaze fixed on the uneven path, my grip firm on the wheelbarrow handles. Let them stare. Let them talk. They saw dirt. I saw destiny. They saw a woman lost. I saw a woman found. Then I heard a clicking sound, unmistakable in its modern crispness. "Wait!" a younger voice piped up, filled with a gleeful mischief. "I'm totally getting this. This is gold. Pure YouTube gold." I glanced up, just for a second. A young woman in the passenger seat of a shiny new car held up her phone, its camera pointed directly at me, a wide, mocking grin on her face. Her friend, the driver, was laughing openly, shaking his head. I continued my slow, steady pace, disappearing behind the crumbling barn, the wheelbarrow rattling a defiant tune. I didn't need to see the video to know what it would be. A short clip, probably set to some silly music, showing poor, crazy Dorothy Henderson in her muddy clothes, pushing her junk on her worthless farm. I could almost hear the comments. What a fall from grace. Her family must be so ashamed. She chose dirt over dignity. And indeed, the video did exactly that. So, it appeared on a local social media page a few days later, discreetly shared by a neighbor who thought I should know what people are saying. It was titled something like, "Local heiress dumps fortune for dirt farm and garbage collection," complete with a little crying emoji. It went mildly viral within our small community, then spread a bit further, a digital testament to my supposed folly. Strangers left comments filled with scorn, pity, or cruel jokes. "Her father disowned her for this," someone wrote. "Guess he knew what he was doing." "Imagine having that kind of privilege and ending up like this," another commented, followed by a string of laughing emojis. I read them all, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. They saw a crazy woman. They saw a failure. They saw a pile of dirt. They saw me, but they saw nothing. The phone in my hand felt light, insignificant. The small gold nugget, hidden safely in a pouch around my neck, felt infinitely heavier. I put the phone down, wiped the dust from my hands, and returned to the shed. The rhythmic clang of the sledgehammer on the quartz began again, a steady, purposeful beat. The small furnace glowed with a new batch of ore. They could laugh. They could film. They could mock. It didn't matter. They were looking at a worthless farm. But beneath the surface, I was holding on to a secret that would soon turn their laughter into stunned silence. And they wouldn't even realize they were already staring at their own future undoing. The rhythmic clang of my sledgehammer against quartz filled the Sunstone sanctuary, a steady beat of defiance against the world's judgment. The viral video continued to circulate, a testament to what everyone thought they knew about me. But I knew better. I wasn't just crushing rock. I was pulverizing their preconceived notions, piece by glittering piece. My hands were strong now, calloused and capable, accustomed to the raw work. The small nuggets I was accumulating, stored carefully in a series of old ceramic jars, were growing steadily. Each one was a tiny sunbeam, a whisper of vindication. I knew it was only a matter of time before someone decided to take a closer look at the crazy woman and her junk. My family, in particular, lived by appearances. The video, depicting me as a public spectacle, would have been an intolerable blight on their carefully constructed reputation. Sure enough, a few days later, a pristine black pickup truck, far too polished for the dusty farm road, pulled up to the gate. It wasn't Harold's usual sedan, nor Phyllis's flashy convertible, but I recognized the driver immediately. It was Murray Bates, one of the overseers for my father's other, more respectable landholdings. He was a quiet man, always dressed neatly, with a way of looking at things as if calculating their exact monetary value. He embodied my father's practical, unromantic view of the world. I watched him from the shadows of the porch as he got out, surveying the dilapidated farm with a critical, almost offended air. He adjusted the brim of his hat, then strode purposefully towards the main house, his boots making precise, unhurried steps on the overgrown path. I let him knock, loud and insistent, for a full minute before I finally emerged, wiping my hands on my worn jeans, doing my best impression of a woman merely tending her neglected garden. "Murray," I said, a hint of surprise in my voice, though I felt none. "What a pleasant surprise." He offered a tight, uncomfortable smile. "Dorothy. Harold sent me, just checking in. Heard, things. Wanted to make sure everything was in order." His gaze swept over my muddy clothes, then to the piles of crushed quartz near the shed. His eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Everything's just fine, Murray," I said, my voice sweet and untroubled. "Just doing a bit of tidying up?" We made small talk for a few minutes, an awkward dance of politeness and unspoken suspicion. He asked about the leaks in the roof, the state of the well, and other innocuous farm matters, but his eyes kept drifting back to the shed, to the faint smoke curling from its crude chimney. I offered him a glass of water, excusing myself to fetch it from the kitchen. It was my practiced signal, the moment I knew he would make his move. I didn't rush. I poured the water, humming a tuneless melody, letting the silence stretch. Then, as if on cue, I heard a faint creak from the direction of the shed. A sound I knew well, the protest of the old, unlatched door. I waited a beat longer, then slowly, deliberately, walked back out. Murray Bates wasn't on the porch. He wasn't anywhere to be seen. A soft smile touched my lips, a secret warmth spreading through me. I strolled casually towards the shed, the glass of water still in my hand. The door, which I had carefully left ajar, now stood open a few inches. A faint light gleamed from within, not the dull sunlight, but something brighter, more concentrated. He had obviously brought his own flashlight. I pushed the door open just enough to peek inside. Murray was there, all right, bent over my workbench, his hands rummaging through a pile of what he likely thought was junk. His flashlight beam, however, had landed squarely on one of my ceramic jars, revealing the unmistakable glint of gold within. His face, usually so impassive, was a mask of shock and disbelief. He snatched a small nugget, weighing it in his palm, his eyes wide with a dawning, greedy understanding. "Looking for something, Murray?" I asked, my voice calm, almost amused. He nearly jumped out of his skin, spinning around, the small gold nugget still clutched in his hand. His face flushed a deep crimson. But I just smiled, a knowing, expectant smile. I knew they would come. And I had been ready for them. Murray Bates froze, caught in the act, the small gold nugget a gleaming accusation in his suddenly sweaty palm. His eyes, wide with a blend of shock and something unmistakably greedy, darted from the nugget to my face, then to the open door. He fumbled, trying to shove the piece back into the ceramic jar, but his hands trembled. "Dorothy," he stammered, his voice thin and reedy, completely unlike his usual composed self. I was just curious. Saw the door open. Thought maybe a critter got in." He tried a nervous laugh that died quickly in the dusty air. I just looked at him, my expression unreadable. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't even dropped the glass of water. "Curiosity led you to my personal belongings, Murray, and to pocket what you found?" My voice was soft, but it carried an edge he couldn't ignore. "That looks rather like the worthless dirt my family talks about, wouldn't you agree?" His face went from crimson to a pale, clammy white. He knew he was caught. He was an overseer, a man whose job was built on trust and efficiency. This was not merely snooping. This was theft. He placed the nugget back with exaggerated care, his movements jerky. "I apologize, Dorothy, truly. Just a lapse in judgment. I'll just be going now." He practically bolted from the shed, practically tripping over his own feet in his haste to escape, the pristine black truck starting with a roar and peeling out in a cloud of dust. I watched him go, a slow smile spreading across my face. He had delivered exactly what I needed. Not just proof that my farm held gold, but proof that he, an agent of my father, had entered my private property and tried to take it. This wasn't just a discovery anymore. It was now a legal precedent, a marker in time. The next few days were quiet. I continued my work, knowing that Murray would be reporting back to Harold. I could almost hear the conversation. Murray, flustered, trying to explain the gold, Harold dismissing it as fool's gold or a delusion, Phyllis scoffing at the whole Dorothy situation becoming even messier. They would have laughed, I was sure, at Murray's gullibility. And since you've made it this far, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps me keep bringing stories like this. The laughter wouldn't last. I took the tiny nugget Murray had handled, along with a few other carefully marked samples from the mine, and made a discreet trip to the nearest large town. I sought out a quiet, unassuming law office, far from the Henderson family's influence, and consulted with a wise old lawyer named Arthur Hollis. He listened patiently, his eyes twinkling as I recounted the tale of my family's dismissal and Murray's unexpected visit. He held the gold nugget, his expression shifting from amusement to professional gravity. "This," he said, tapping the small, gleaming piece, "is your golden key, Dorothy. This act of trespass and attempted theft, witnessed by you and evidenced by this, establishes your prior claim to this discovery on your land. It proves not only that the gold exists, but that your family, through their agent, was aware of it and tried to seize it. After they disowned you and declared the land worthless, they can't claim ignorance anymore. More importantly, they can't claim it as theirs. Mr. Hollis helped me draft a series of quiet, legally binding letters. They weren't aggressive, merely informational. One, sent directly to Harold, stated that all rights to any minerals found on my property, the Henderson farm, belonged exclusively to me, Dorothy Henderson, and referenced a specific date that predated Murray's visit. It also mentioned the clear evidence of an attempted theft of said minerals. Another, sent to a public notary, formally registered my claim to the Sunstone Vein. The calm before the storm didn't last long. I heard through the local grapevine that Harold had received my letter. It was delivered not with a lawyer's aggressive tone, but with quiet, undeniable legal weight. I pictured him in his study, his face clouding over as he read the precise, measured words. Then I imagined him calling Murray Bates, demanding an explanation, no longer scoffing at the idea of gold. I could almost feel his growing unease from miles away. The Henderson family, who had so confidently cast me out, was about to realize that their worthless decision had not only disinherited me from them, but them from a fortune. And they were just beginning to feel very, very worried. The silence from my family's side of town was louder than any shouting match could have been. It buzzed with unspoken anxiety, a rich, potent tension that traveled through the very air. I knew they were talking, strategizing, probably tearing their hair out over Arthur Hollis's quietly authoritative letters. Let them. I had gold to process. My days continued in the rhythmic, satisfying blur of excavation and refinement. The ceramic jars were getting heavier, each one a testament to my perseverance. I was now generating enough to consider my next steps, to move beyond merely stockpiling. I wanted to sell some of this gold, but not just to any buyer. I wanted to do it with a flourish, a quiet declaration that would resonate far beyond my dusty farm. Then, an unexpected letter arrived. It wasn't from Harold, nor was it a bill. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with an elegant, embossed seal I didn't recognize. Inside, printed on heavy paper, was an invitation. It was from the National Association of Geological Discoveries and Innovations, requesting my presence at their annual summit in a large city several states away. They'd heard, vaguely, through academic channels, about a unique geological find and an unconventional approach to mineral extraction. They were fascinated by the hints of ancient workings and expressed a desire to hear more about my discovery and methodology. The invitation was a bit vague on specifics, likely to maintain discretion, but it was unmistakably aimed at me. I smiled. Academic channels, indeed. Arthur Hollis, my quiet lawyer, clearly had a wider network than I first imagined. He had suggested a few discreet inquiries to gauge interest in my new methods. This was a perfect opportunity. Anonymity suited me just fine for now. The journey to the city felt like stepping into another world. I wore my best, but still simple, navy dress, sensible shoes, and carried a worn leather briefcase. No flashy jewelry, no designer labels. Just me, Dorothy Henderson, with my hands still faintly smelling of earth and raw minerals. The conference hall was a dazzling expanse of polished marble, gleaming brass, and hushed conversations. Men and women in sharp suits and elegant dresses glided by, their name tags proclaiming impressive titles and institutions. My simple attire stood out, a quiet contrast in a room full of loud declarations of success. But I felt no shame. no inadequacy. I knew the true weight I carried. I found my way to the designated presentation room, a large auditorium with tiered seating. A spotlight illuminated the stage, where a large screen displayed the conference logo. The room was already buzzing with anticipation. I took a seat in the back, observing, letting the atmosphere wash over me. I saw some famous names in geology and archaeology among the attendees. It was quite the gathering. Finally, a distinguished-looking man stepped onto the stage, tapping the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying clearly through the hall, "our final presentation of the day is one that has intrigued us all. We have very little information to go on, by the presenter's request, but what we do know suggests a truly groundbreaking discovery, melding ancient wisdom with modern ingenuity. It is my distinct honor to introduce Ms. Dorothy Henderson, who will be speaking about her unique findings regarding the Sunstone Vein, an ancient legacy rediscovered." As my name echoed through the cavernous hall, I felt a tremor of anticipation, not fear. I rose from my seat, adjusted my dress, and took a deep, steadying breath. My heart beat a slow, powerful rhythm. This was it. The moment I stepped into the light, my quiet triumph would begin to ripple out, reaching ears far beyond the conference walls, all the way back to a certain colonial home. I walked towards the stage, ready to share the truth they had so carelessly discarded. I walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily dazzling me. The murmuring ceased, replaced by a quiet hush of expectation. The distinguished man gestured for me to approach the podium. I took a deep breath, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of faces, all waiting. "Good afternoon, everyone," I began, my voice clear and steady. "My name is Dorothy Henderson, and I am here to talk to you about a forgotten legacy, a secret hidden beneath our feet, and the enduring wisdom of those who walked this earth long before us." I paused, letting my gaze sweep over the audience. I had brought a few discreet samples with me, carefully prepared to highlight the unique properties of my discovery. I held up a small, palm-sized piece of quartz, shot through with veins of raw, glittering gold, its surface catching the light like miniature sunbeams. "This is a fragment from what I have named the Sunstone Vein," I explained. "It isn't just a geological curiosity. It's a window into an ancient world, a testament to an ancestral mine that has lain dormant and undiscovered for centuries, nestled right here in our own country." I explained how my journey began, not with complex instruments, but with whispers from the past. My great-great-grandmother's journals, filled with observations about stones that glowed like the sun, were my first map. Indigenous legends, passed down through generations about a golden heart of the earth, gave me direction. Others saw only an old, dried-up spring bed. I saw peculiar mineral deposits. Where others saw a weathered rock outcrop, I noticed an unusual, specific pattern in the mosses clinging to its surface. I described how these seemingly insignificant clues led me to an overgrown path, to a collapsed section of a small cave system. "Inside," I continued, "after weeks of patient work, I found more than just gold. I found history. Primitive mining tools, petrified by time, lay beside ancient pictographs. These weren't just random deposits. They were the clear markings of a civilization that worked this vein long ago, before it was lost to time and legend." I displayed a photograph on the large screen behind me, a close-up of the beautiful gold-bearing quartz, its deep red and orange hues reflecting light. "The Sunstone Vein," I said, my voice full of quiet pride, "was found on a property that, for decades, had been dismissed. A dilapidated farm, considered worthless by many, including my own family, who saw only dirt and decay. In the third row, a man in a crisp suit, Floyd Cobb, a business associate who frequently handled Harold Henderson's real estate ventures, shifted uncomfortably. He had come to the summit to network, not to hear about ancient history. He initially dismissed my talk as overly sentimental. But then he heard Henderson Farm. Then, worthless by many, including my own family. His eyes widened. He knew exactly which neglected farm I was talking about. He knew the Henderson family had publicly disowned Dorothy over that very piece of land. A cold dread began to trickle down his spine. As I continued to speak, describing the very geological features of the property, the blood drained from Floyd Cobb's face, leaving him a ghastly, pale white. Floyd Cobb, his face still a ghostly white, fumbled for his phone, his mind racing. He knew Harold Henderson would want to hear this immediately. The worthless patch of dirt wasn't just dirt, it was gold. The Henderson family's publicly stated dismissal of Dorothy, their disownment of her and her farm, was now an undeniable legal fact. A sword hanging over their heads. He slipped out of the conference room before my presentation concluded, needing to make a call that would shake the very foundations of the Henderson legacy. Back home, the news landed like a thunderclap. Harold, initially dismissive, refusing to believe that eccentric Dorothy could have found anything of value, was forced to confront the truth when Floyd Cobb, a man whose judgment he trusted, recounted my detailed presentation. Harold's face, usually so composed and authoritative, contorted with a mixture of disbelief and growing fury. Phyllis, hearing the commotion, joined him, her own carefully constructed world of social standing threatening to crumble. Arthur Hollis had anticipated their predictable outrage. My quiet lawyer had already moved swiftly, filing the necessary documents to formally register my claim to the Sunstone Vein and its contents, citing my long-standing occupation of the farm, my prior discovery, and the irrefutable evidence of Murray Bates' attempted theft. He served the Henderson family with a clear, concise notice. Any attempt to interfere with my property or my operations would be met with immediate legal action. Harold, blinded by greed and a lifetime of unchallenged authority, ignored the warnings. He believed his family name, his wealth, and his influence would easily crush me, his disowned daughter. He tried to exert pressure, sending his own lawyers to claim the farm as ancestral property, arguing that any minerals belonged to the larger Henderson estate. But Arthur Hollis was ready. He presented the court with Harold's own public statements, broadcast through local media and gossip, disowning me and declaring the farm worthless. He highlighted the official records of my solo ownership and the documented date of my discovery. The turning point came when Murray Bates, under subpoena, was forced to testify about his visit to my shed. His stammering confession about seeing the gold nuggets and trying to pocket one, corroborated by my calm, unshakable testimony, painted a damning picture. It wasn't just about ownership. It was about their calculated deception, their public shaming of me, and their attempt to seize what they had disavowed. The legal system, slow as it often was, saw through their transparent attempts to reclaim a fortune they had so carelessly thrown away. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. The Henderson family's claim was rejected. All rights to the Sunstone Vein and the farm were declared unequivocally mine, Dorothy Henderson. The court also levied significant penalties against Harold Henderson for his aggressive, unfounded legal challenge, and for the financial harm caused by his public defamation of my character, which had impacted my ability to conduct business with others. The judge noted that the family had gone to great lengths to discredit me, only to then try and lay claim to my success. The consequences were far-reaching. The legal battle exposed not just their greed concerning the farm, but also some questionable financial dealings within Harold's other businesses, which had come under scrutiny during the proceedings. His reputation, once unblemished, began to crumble. Investors pulled out, partnerships dissolved, and public trust evaporated. Harold Henderson's empire, built on appearances and conventional investments, faltered. One by one, the doors to his satellite businesses began to close, quiet steel rolling down over their entrances, reflecting the grim faces of employees who now found themselves without work. It wasn't a jubilant moment for me, watching the collapse. It was a somber, quiet satisfaction, a profound sense of justice unfolding in the hushed reality of closing doors. The quiet steel rolling down on Harold's businesses was a somber sight, a final, unceremonious punctuation mark on a long, troubled sentence. I felt no joy in their downfall, only the heavy, quiet satisfaction of justice served. The legal battles had drained their resources and, more importantly, exposed the brittle foundations of their carefully constructed image. My own legal team, led by the ever-thoughtful Arthur Hollis, worked diligently to ensure the court's rulings were fully enacted. My farm, the home I had nurtured and believed in, was unequivocally mine. The settlement money, substantial due to Harold's repeated attempts to reclaim what was never his, now rested in a secure account. With the legal dust settling, I could finally turn my full attention to what truly mattered: the land, the Sunstone Vein, and my own future. My professional standing, once a whisper dismissed by my family, was now firmly established. The National Association of Geological Discoveries and Innovations had published an extensive article on the Sunstone Vein, attributing the discovery and ancient site preservation to me. Invitations to speak, advise, and even teach began to arrive, all handled by Arthur with his characteristic grace and discretion. I was no longer merely eccentric Dorothy. I was a respected authority. That first night, truly settling back into my farmhouse, felt different. I had always been there, yes, but now the air itself seemed to hum with peace, with profound belonging. The old house, now repaired and made comfortable with some of my initial gold earnings, offered a silent embrace. The simple bed, once just a place to rest weary bones, became a sanctuary. I changed into a soft nightgown, lit a single lamp, and lay down. The mattress, freshly aired, felt impossibly soft. Outside, the night sounds of the farm were familiar and comforting: the hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. I closed my eyes, a deep sigh escaping my lips, and for the first time in many years, slept without the subtle weight of unspoken injustice. It was the deepest, most restorative sleep I'd ever known. A true homecoming. The question of the settlement money lingered, a benevolent presence. Arthur had presented me with a detailed breakdown, outlining the sums, the penalties, and my full legal recovery. It was a staggering amount, more than I had ever dreamed of possessing, far more than I would ever need for myself. My family, I knew, expected me to use it to expand my mining operations, perhaps to buy back their original colonial home, or to simply live a life of extravagant ease, proving them wrong in the most conventional way possible. But I had never been conventional. My true wealth was not in the gold itself, but in the history it revealed and the knowledge it offered. I thought about the indigenous legends, the ancient tools, the land that had whispered its secrets to me. I thought about the community that had quietly watched my struggle, some with skepticism, some with a flicker of understanding. I called Arthur Hollis into my office, a small, sunlit room in the farmhouse where my journals and maps now covered a large, sturdy desk. "Arthur," I said, a warm smile playing on my lips. "I've made a decision about the settlement funds." He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of curiosity in his usually composed expression. "I want to establish a foundation," I explained, "dedicated to preserving historical lands, supporting archaeological research into forgotten cultures, and funding educational programs for local children about the natural history and geology of our region. And, I added, meeting his gaze, a significant portion will be quietly designated to assist families in our community who have been impacted by unforeseen financial hardship, especially those whose livelihoods were disrupted by recent, unfortunate business closures. Arthur Hollis's jaw dropped, a rare and truly surprising sight. Arthur Hollis's surprised expression, a rare sight, brought a soft chuckle to my lips. It was a good moment, a clear turning point. I watched him collect himself, his legal mind already working through the practicalities of my vision. That day, sitting in my sunlit farmhouse office, truly marked the beginning of a new chapter. Looking back, it felt like the culmination of a journey that had started so long ago, not with gold, but with a whisper, a hunch, a stubborn belief in something others couldn't see. I remembered the early days, poring over those old journals, tracing faded lines on tattered maps. My family, especially Harold and Phyllis, had seen it as a quaint hobby, a distraction for their eccentric Dorothy. They couldn't fathom that a neglected farm, dismissed as a worthless patch of dirt, held more value, more history, than all their conventional investments combined. Their scorn had been a heavy cloak at times, making me feel isolated, a dreamer out of step with their practical world. But that isolation also gave me the quiet space to listen, to truly connect with the land. It allowed me to see the peculiar mineral deposits, to notice the specific moss patterns, to understand the subtle clues that led me to the Sunstone Vein. The moment I first saw that seam of raw gold interwoven with the deep red and orange quartz, it wasn't just about wealth. It was a profound vindication, a confirmation that my intuition, my years of patient observation, and my respect for the ancient stories were not foolishness. It was a connection to something ancient and powerful, a secret entrusted to me by the earth itself. That initial awe was soon overshadowed by the battles, of course. My family, so quick to disown me for a perceived failure, was even quicker to try and claim my success. Their greed was a stark mirror, reflecting the true nature of what they valued, and what they had so carelessly thrown away. The legal fight, though draining, solidified my resolve. With Arthur by my side, we didn't just win a case, we exposed a truth. The public shaming they had inflicted upon me, the way they had framed me as irresponsible and irrational, unraveled under the scrutiny of justice. Their empire, built on appearances and a narrow view of success, crumbled because it lacked the deep, enduring roots that come from integrity. Watching their businesses close, seeing the impact on the community, was never a cause for celebration. It was a quiet reminder that actions have consequences, that neglect and arrogance can have profound, unexpected repercussions. The foundation I established, born from the very funds they'd tried to deny me, became my legacy. It wasn't just about gold. It was about honoring history, supporting new discoveries, and empowering the next generation to understand and cherish the world around them. It was about giving back to the community that had quietly endured, a way to mend some of the tears that Harold's downfall had caused. This was something they could never take away from me. Not the satisfaction of the discovery, not the connection to the ancient past, not the ability to do good in the world, and certainly not the deep peace of my home. My spirit was rooted deeper than any deed or bank account. What I built was more than just a mine or a fortune. It was a testament to belief, to patience, and to the enduring power of listening to the whispers of the earth. Innovation doesn't have an address. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Your support is what brings these stories to more people.